At some point, maybe right now, maybe recently, you have felt it. The sense that you are not as capable as people believe you are. That you have somehow fooled the people around you into thinking you are competent, qualified, or deserving of the position you are in. That at some point, someone is going to look more closely and the whole thing is going to come apart. This feeling has a name, imposter syndrome, and research suggests that up to 70% of people experience it at some point in their lives. High achievers, successful professionals, people who by any external measure have earned exactly what they have. And yet the feeling persists. The accomplishments do not feel real. The praise does not land. The evidence that you belong does not override the certainty that you do not. Your ancient ancestor never felt this. Not once. Not in a lifetime. And understanding exactly why requires you to look at what imposter syndrome actually is, not as a psychological quirk, but as a structural consequence of a very specific kind of life. Let's go. Start with what imposter syndrome actually requires to exist. Because like poverty, like body shame, like anxiety, it does not arise spontaneously. It requires conditions. Imposter syndrome requires a domain of expertise that can be faked, a credential that can be obtained without genuine mastery, a title that signals competence but does not guarantee it. In a world where what you can do is immediately and continuously visible to everyone around you, faking is not possible. Imposter syndrome cannot exist when your competence is on permanent public display. Imposter syndrome requires separation between your identity and your demonstrated ability. When who you are and what you can do are the same thing, when your role in the group is determined entirely by what you have actually done in front of the people who know you, there is no gap between the version of you that people perceive and the version of you that you secretly believe yourself to be. Imposter syndrome requires an audience that does not know you. Strangers, institutions, evaluators who must guess at your competence because they cannot see your history. In a world of 150 people who have watched you every day of your life, there are no strangers. There is no one who does not already know exactly what you are capable of. Ancient humans lived in small bands of roughly 100 to 150 people. Everyone in that band had watched you grow up. They had seen you succeed and fail. They had watched you learn to hunt, to track, to build, to navigate, to care for others. Your competence was not a credential on a piece of paper that could be questioned. It was a living record, observed by every person who mattered to you, updated every single day. You did not claim to be a hunter. You either hunted or you did not. The group had watched you hunt. There was nothing to fake. There was no gap between the version of yourself you presented and the version of yourself you feared being found out as. In the ancient world, you were what you did. In the modern world, you are often what you claim to be, or what a credential claims you are, and the gap between the claim and the reality is exactly where imposter syndrome lives. Now let us talk about credentials, because this is the piece that almost no one discusses when they talk about imposter syndrome. The modern world runs on credentials, degrees, certifications, job titles, years of experience on a resume. These are all signals of competence, symbols designed to communicate to strangers what you know and what you can do. They exist because strangers need a shortcut. They cannot watch you work for 10 years before deciding whether to trust you. They need a signal. But signals can be separated from the thing they signal. You can obtain a degree without mastering the subject. You can hold a job title without fully embodying what it represents. You can have years of experience without becoming excellent. The signal exists independently of the competence it was designed to communicate. And when you know the signal and question the competence, imposter syndrome is exactly what you feel. Ancient humans had no credentials. They had track records, publicly visible, continuously updated, impossible to fake track records. If you were known as the person who could navigate by the stars, it was because you had navigated by the stars in front of people who could evaluate whether you had done it correctly. The track record was the credential. They were the same thing. The modern credential is a summary of a track record that the person reading it cannot verify. That gap between the summary and the reality is what imposter syndrome inhabits. Now here is the piece that makes the whole thing land differently. The comparison problem. Ancient humans compared themselves to 150 people, real people, people they had watched grow up alongside them, people whose strengths and weaknesses they understood in full. You knew who was better than you at tracking and who was worse. You knew who was stronger and who was faster. The comparison was grounded in complete mutual knowledge. You knew exactly where you stood. Modern humans compare themselves to millions, and not to real, fully known people with visible strengths and weaknesses, to curated, highlighted, professionally optimized representations of other people, LinkedIn profiles that show only the successes, resumes that present only the achievements, social media feeds that show only the moments worth showing. You are comparing your internal experience, which includes every doubt, every failure, every moment of confusion, to other people's external presentations, which include only what they chose to show. The comparison is structurally unfair. It was always going to produce the feeling that everyone else has figured something out that you have not, because in a very specific sense, they have. They have figured out how to present themselves. That is what the modern world rewards, the ability to construct and maintain a convincing presentation of competence. Ancient humans never needed to learn this skill. Their competence was the presentation. Now the presentation often precedes the competence, and the gap between them is the source of the imposter feeling. There is one more piece, the role of novelty and rapid change. In the ancient world, you did what your parents did. You learned what your community had always known. Your competence was built on skills that had been tested and validated across generations. The knowledge that you were learning was proven. The techniques had worked. The gap between what you were taught and what actually worked was very small. Modern professional life requires continuous navigation of genuinely new territory, new industries, new technologies, new roles that did not exist a decade ago. You are frequently being asked to perform competently in domains where no one has been doing it for long, where the rules are still being written, where genuinely no one is sure what mastery even looks like yet. In these conditions, feeling like an imposter is not a psychological problem. It is an accurate reading of a situation where the ground is still moving and no one, including the people who seem most confident, has it fully figured out. The people who do not feel like imposters in rapidly changing fields are not more competent than you. They are often less self-aware. The feeling of not quite knowing what you are doing is, in genuinely novel territory, the most honest relationship you can have with the situation. So what do you do with all of this? You cannot move back to a band of 150 people where your track record is permanently visible and credentials do not exist. You cannot opt out of the comparison machinery. But you can recognize that imposter syndrome is not evidence that you are an imposter. It is evidence that you are living in conditions that produce the feeling regardless of your actual competence. High achievers feel it more, not less, because they are more aware of the gap between what they know and what they do not know, and more sensitive to the distance between the credential and the mastery. The ancient measure of competence was simple. Did you do the thing? Did it work? Did the people who watched you form a judgment that you were capable? You still have access to that judgment. Not from strangers reading your credentials, but from the people who have watched you work, the ones who know your track record, the ones who cannot be fooled by a presentation because they were there for the reality. That judgment, the one from people who actually know, is the one your nervous system was built to trust. The credential is a poor substitute for it, and the imposter feeling is, in part, your ancient self recognizing that what is being used to evaluate you is not the thing it was designed to recognize.